Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. We are going to be talking about the Strengthening Facilitation Skills training curriculum, which is for programs that serve youth. This curriculum draws on best practices in participant centered and trauma informed facilitation. It's designed to strengthen facilitation skills so that the program environment really maximizes engagement and learning for youth. The curriculum and materials that we'll be talking about today can be used by federal grantees and other organizations to strengthen delivery of any program that they're using. Next slide, please. Thank you. My name is Erin Welch, and I'm a researcher at Mathematica. I'm joined by Scott Roby from Public Strategies. Scott is a senior program manager, and he's a trainer with decades of experience providing training to youth and providing technical support to youth serving organizations. We're also here with Marianne Slanina, the Stronger Youth Program Manager at Youth and Family Services in South Dakota. This evaluation and the curriculum creation were conducted under the Strengthening Relationship Education and Marriage Services Evaluation, which we call STREAMS for short. STREAMS is a large multi-site evaluation of the healthy marriage and relationship education programs. It's conducted by Mathematica and Public Strategies for the Administration for Children and Families in the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The STREAMS evaluation is connected to the federal Healthy Marriage and Responsible Fatherhood Initiative, which is administered by the Office of Family Assistance at ACF. STREAMS emphasizes program improvement and answering questions of particular policy relevance. It focuses on outcomes for specific adult and youth populations that are served by HMRE programs at several sites across the country. Today, we're going to begin by sharing, next slide, please. Thank you. Today, we're going to begin by sharing a brief overview of the process that we use to develop and to refine this curriculum. Then we're going to describe the curriculum components, and we'll talk about the materials that are available with it. We're going to share who might benefit from these materials and how you could use them. And then finally, we're going to hear from Marianne, who participated in the facilitation skills trainings. She has used the facilitation strategies, and she's provided feedback along the way to refine the trainings and the related materials. I'd now like to invite Seth Chamberlain from the Office of Family Assistance to open the webinar.
All right, thank you so much, Erin. Thanks everyone for joining. As you may know, federally funded HMRE programs have been working with youth since 2006. And the skills we taught in 2006 are still relevant today. Of course, we can always get better at how we teach kids. We can grow every day. The ways youth interact change, after all. For example, there's much more social media than in 2006. Anybody remember MySpace, right? Which reminds me, do you know the name of the small stream that runs through Silicon Valley? It's Facebook, right? Well, anyway, speaking of brooks and streams, the Streams Project has done a lot of work to identify ways that we can better work with youth. Many of you may know, my first career was I was a middle school Spanish teacher. One year, though, I taught 2 sections of high school Spanish. And guys, I got to tell you, those high schoolers were boring. Compared to my middle schoolers, I mean, it was so hard to maintain energy. You know, with the middle schoolers, I could play games and they loved it. And the high schoolers, they were like, "Senor, do we have to do this?" You know, when I tried to recap or debrief what we learned at the end of each lesson, they would deadpan look at me and say, "Senor, is this on the test?" So, and they didn't trust me immediately like the middle schoolers tended to. You know, energy and debriefing and trust. How do we do these things well? I sure could have used some pointers. I could have used a stream of knowledge. And fortunately, we have an A team to help us. Actually, I mean an A stream. You know, like they used to say in the 80s, if you have a problem and no one else can help, and if you can find them, maybe you can hire the A stream. You have to remember your 80s TV to get that reference. So thanks for tuning in. You're in good hands. This is the real live stream. Thanks so much. I'll be around for questions at the end.
Thank you, Seth. As Seth kind of alluded to, the training curriculum that we're going to discuss is intended to improve the general facilitation skills of facilitators of group-based educational and prevention programs for youth. It's not tied to a specific curriculum, and it can be used in a variety of settings and programs. The goal of the curriculum is ultimately to improve youth engagement and youth learning. So let's go ahead and dive in and talk about how it was developed. So we used a formative evaluation to design, test, and refine the facilitation skills training curriculum that could be used by HMRE supervisors and facilitators. Mathematica and Public Strategies partnered with Youth and Family Services in South Dakota and Catholic Charities of Wayne County in New York on this evaluation. Formative evaluations are evaluations that are used to test and to improve interventions over time before you scale them up. So we used a formative evaluation design that was guided by the Learn, Innovate, Improve, or LI squared framework. You can see a visual of it on the screen here. LI squared is a three-step process. It's grounded in collaboration between practitioners and applied researchers. And its goal is really to help programs design and then iteratively test program improvements. The collaborative process for us started even before we tested and refined the curriculum. So during the learn phase of LI squared, we identified challenges that facilitators face in their programs through semi-structured interviews with them. And then we also had collaborative conversations with the sites that are involved in the evaluation to select training topics. The curriculum now has 3 modules. It was developed by drawing on evidence-based facilitation strategies, and it was refined by our experiences in the field during the formative evaluation. Next slide, please. Thank you. We gathered evidence throughout the evaluation to iteratively refine the curriculum during each of 3 cycles. So after each of 3 trainings, facilitators tested out the strategies that they learned in those trainings, and then we collected data. We had interviews with program facilitators and supervisors. We also conducted observations of facilitators, and we used the data that we collected to improve handouts during testing, and then also to refine later trainings to share additional facilitation strategies and to include more time for practice. When we learned that we needed some more time for practice, one thing we added was called teachbacks. These are an opportunity for facilitators to prepare and then to practice delivering part of a lesson using facilitation strategies that they have just learned in the training. And then they get feedback on that lesson or that part of a lesson from the trainer and their peers. We also refined a supervisor observation tool based on the data. After facilitators had time to test out the facilitation strategies and after we'd collected data, we then had debriefing discussions with facilitators and supervisors to plan for the next cycle and to improve the prior training and materials. We used human-centered design techniques to gather feedback and to really make sure that everyone had a voice in those conversations. So as an example, one activity that we used was called Rose, Bud, Thorn. I imagine that some of you may have used this before, but in it, each person shared a rose, which is a highlight or a success, a bud, which is a new idea or an area for growth, and then a thorn, which is a challenge or something that they needed more support with. If you're interested, you can learn more about the curriculum development process in a report that describes the full formative evaluation. The curriculum has 3 modules which are focused on the topics shown here and which Seth alluded to. So as I mentioned, these were selected by the sites based on the needs and the challenges of their programs. They selected these 3 from a list of 9 total options for different topics. The first facilitation skills training module is on managing energy, and it's designed to increase facilitators' knowledge of how youth energy naturally changes during the day, and it gives them techniques to manage that energy in the classroom. The second training is called Debriefing and Drawing Out Teachable Moments. This one trains facilitators to ask questions after each lesson or each activity to draw out key learnings from youth. And then it helps youth to connect what they've learned to past lessons and to their lives. And then finally, building trust and challenging the comfort zone helps facilitators build trust with youth, and it helps them to challenge them to begin exploring new skills and new behaviors. The facilitators who participated in the formative evaluation tested out the strategies that they learned after each facilitation skills training. And you're going to hear more from Marianne later, but overall, we heard that they found value in the facilitation skills trainings, and they were able to use the facilitation strategies that they learned in their programs. They felt like the facilitation strategies enhanced their facilitation skills and improved youth engagement. So you may be wondering who this curriculum may be a good fit for. So let's talk about that. This curriculum can be used by organizations that provide group-based education and prevention programs like HMRE programs, dating violence prevention programs, social and character development programs, and sexual risk avoidance or teen pregnancy prevention programs. It's intended to be used by program staff like facilitators and supervisors. Oh, sorry about that. So this is really intended to be used by supervisors and facilitators and potentially other staff that are really looking to improve the quality of facilitation and to engage youth more effectively in their programs. The curriculum can boost facilitators' confidence and it can build their knowledge about effective strategies to engage youth, really all in service of improving learning for the youth participants. Ideally, trainees would have some experience in the classroom and with their curriculum already so that they have some context as they're entering these trainings. But if they don't have that experience yet, it's also okay for them to participate. It's designed for use with any substantive curriculum that facilitators provide to youth. It can supplement any curriculum-specific trainings that organizations may already be receiving. And the strategies taught can be useful in any program. So during the evaluation, the facilitators used the strategies in traditional school settings and also in other settings like juvenile justice centers and community-based organizations. The curriculum has a trainer's manual, which is really designed to serve as a detailed roadmap for a trainer. Programs can identify an experienced facilitator either inside or outside of their organizations to then deliver the facilitation skills training. And we'll talk a bit more about that later. Scott's now going to share more about the curriculum. He'll talk through the different materials that are included, and he'll also share some guidance on how they can be used.
Thanks, Aaron. Yeah, and so just so you know, the curriculum is divided into 4 key pieces or components. Number 1 would be the trainer's guide with the accompanying slide decks that come along with it. Next, we have specific tools for facilitators to use in the form of different back pocket tools and supplementary materials. We also created an observation form so that a supervisor or lead facilitator can easily go in and observe in the room as the information is being delivered and provide feedback. And then we created tip sheets that can be used ongoing. So let's talk a little bit through each one. So the first is the trainer's guide and the slide decks. Now, as Aaron mentioned, the trainer's guide is really intended to be that detailed roadmap for the supervisor, the lead facilitator, or a skilled facilitator within your organization to use to train a group of facilitators or other supervisors. In particular, could be anyone delivering your curriculum to youth. In the introduction of the trainer's guide, you'll notice that it will include guidance on who can benefit most from the facilitation skills trainings. It also overviews the structure of the curriculum, and it provides other practical considerations and suggestions for how it could be used in your programs. There's a separate module, again, as mentioned, for managing energy, which is all about increasing knowledge regarding both the energy cycle and how it directly affects the student's ability to engage in and learn the materials that you're sharing. Facilitators are also introduced to a variety of tips and techniques for managing energy and resetting that energy as things slump, as energy slides or slumps over the course of your workshop. The second module is around debriefing, which is really about the effective use of debriefing skills to guide discussions and then bring out or highlight insights, connections, or any interpretations that are identified by your students. Facilitators will increase their ability to effectively debrief an activity and to draw out those insights and learning points from the students' experiences. The third is building trust and challenging the comfort zone. And it's because, we all have to establish a priority of being intentional about building and maintaining trust with our student groups and with any group that we serve, because that's so imperative to creating that safe learning environment. And so we build on the foundation of trust so that facilitators can then leverage that trust to challenge the students to begin exploring new skills and behaviors that might at first feel either unnatural or silly, or at the very least, they're unfamiliar at first. So trust, really building that trust within the group and with the facilitator, really makes it safe for students to follow that facilitator outside of their comfort zone and explore new ideas and behaviors. Each module is also supported with accompanying slide decks that the trainer can use as they present the information to the folks or facilitators being trained within your organization. Next slide, please. So each module contains tips for the trainer and other things to consider as they prepare to deliver the content. It includes key takeaways to both anchor and support the trainer in the learning objectives of the module. It includes logistical information like what materials you would need. It articulates the objectives of each section, and then it provides you an estimated timing for the full modules and each of the individual lessons as well contained within the modules. You'll also find detailed talking points with suggestions for how the trainer can tailor them to meet the specific needs of the trainees or those facilitators being trained, since most of your programs will have folks that are all different levels of expertise in facilitating curriculum. So this contains something for well-seasoned facilitators as well as the very new or newbie facilitators. And it provides a lot of both solid theory and then opportunities for trainees to practice and apply the information. Each module has concrete facilitation skills that the facilitators can actually use directly in their workshops with youth to foster the trainees' learning. There are also prompts for engaging discussions and activities, and then, of course, opportunities to practice those during the training session. These activities and discussions will help trainees internalize what they're learning and builds the skills in using some of the strategies that are provided. The modules also include, again, both guidance and suggestions for how to be responsive to youth's needs, their preferences, and their identities. Next slide, please. So next are the tools for facilitators receiving the training. Each of the three modules have tools for facilitators to help them actually put into practice the facilitation strategies that they learn within the training. Each module has what we called a back pocket tip card that literally is something like a large, designed to be printed on like a large index card that facilitators can refer to on the fly as they're either planning for lessons, or they can actually quickly refer to them during the facilitation of a workshop. These quick tips take key ideas from the trainings and put them right at your disposal as you're delivering your curriculum content. The modules include a wealth of other resources like checklists, activity descriptions. For example, the building trust modules includes a back pocket tip card, a one-pager with tips for managing disruptive behavior, and a list of trust building activities. Each one is complete with materials lists and a step-by-step instruction on how you can facilitate that activity. Facilitators, as we went through the training and the process of developing, found that some of the materials were most helpful early on as they began to implement these new facilitation strategies, and then others of the supplementary materials were more helpful to continue their development as they gained expertise with those strategies. Next slide, please. The next is the supervisor observation tool. And trainers and supervisors can use this observation tool to both guide their observations and support the development of facilitators through a focused observation and feedback process. Now, the tool includes guidance for the observer. It includes a section where you can create notes of key takeaways for the facilitators or facilitator being observed. It includes a section for the observer to take additional notes, as well as detailed objectives or detailed pieces to, excuse me, to look for, organized by the timing within the session. So as you can see on the slide, these are things that the observer would look for at the beginning of the session. There are also key pieces to look for throughout the session as it's going on, and then again at the end. So it gives the observer the heads up of what they should be looking for at any given time throughout their observation. And these items are all aligned to each of the content pieces within the three modules. Trainers or supervisors would ideally observe facilitators a few weeks after each training and then a month or two later, so that and they'll use the observation form during the observation and then hold a debrief to discuss what they observed with the facilitator and ways that they can improve. The sheet's really designed so that the observer can give the key takeaways section to the facilitators immediately after the observation, so the facilitator can process and think about their strengths, what they did really well, and then where their areas of growth before they meet with the observer to then debrief, which would be at a later meeting. Next slide, please. Finally, we have the tip sheets, and as a supplement to the facilitation skills training, there's one tip sheet per module that provides key lessons from the curriculum. And these tip sheets are 2 pages long, so they also can be easily printed on one page front to back and then taken with the facilitator as needed for additional support and development. This is a perfect example of the type of supplementary materials that could be used potentially by the facilitators after the training, but as they've had a little experience implementing the strategies. And each tip sheet offers essential content, quick tips, activities, and strategies for the facilitators. Now, of course, to get the full benefits from these materials, we do recommend that everyone complete the full training, but in a pinch, these tip sheets can absolutely be used by someone who could not complete the entire training, or they could use these tip sheets to support their implementation and then go through the training a little later on. So how to use the materials. To use them, first you want to identify who would be the person in your organization that you would see as a skilled trainer or a master or lead trainer that would be available to train your group of facilitators. Ideally, the size would be up to 10 to 12 folks. Then determine the facilitator's needs and which facilitation skills trainings you'll provide, because you can provide them all at once, but they can also be used independently. So, for example, an organization could choose to provide one of the three. For instance, if you're experiencing challenges on managing energy, you may focus just on that unit for a while. Now, we suggest that you space the facilitation skills trainings out over time, because that will allow you to provide your facilitators with a bit of information and focus on, say, managing energy first. Then after a while, they would come back after practicing, and you would build upon that and add debriefing to look at how they can draw out those teachable moments. So you can space them out over time. However, you can deliver them consecutively if you choose in the moment. And before each facilitation skills training, whoever your master trainer or lead facilitator is should review the trainer guidance slides in their practice and preparation for training your facilitators. They should also print the slides and supplementary materials for each of the trainees to have for reference. We estimate that each facilitation skills training will take, each module will take at least 4 hours. The timing will, of course, vary depending upon the size of your group and which of the optional activities you decide to include. Then after each training, the facilitators should intentionally practice and use the strategies that they learned, referring to the printed slide decks and supplementary materials for supports, as well as the ongoing observations. And as we had discussed, following the training, the supervisors or trainings, those observations should be regular and ongoing to be able to debrief with your facilitators and continue to foster their growth and learning in the strategies. So next I'll turn it over to Erin to talk about using the curriculum.
Thank you, Scott. So as we've mentioned, the facilitators and the supervisors who participated in the facilitation skills trainings and tested out the strategies and used those supporting materials Scott talked about, they found the curriculum to be useful. From their perspective, they felt like youth were more engaged after they had received the trainings, and they felt like there were positive changes in engagement. They shared a lot of lessons with us along the way, and so I want to take a few moments to highlight a few key lessons. So first, they found that the strategies in each of the 3 different modules worked really well together and complemented each other. So for example, when they made sure that they were managing use energy, it then helped them to leave enough time for debriefs. Across all of the modules, the facilitators and supervisors found that making time to intentionally plan was incredibly important. So they planned ahead to identify when they would use different strategies, when they'd incorporate them into lessons, and to think about which strategies were appropriate for which lessons. They found that the strategies were generally applicable across contexts, and we heard that facilitators used some strategies more than others depending on their preferences, depending on the needs of the students in their classrooms, and just the broader context of their group. So some strategies they felt worked better with older youth, and some they felt worked better with younger youth, and they were able to tailor which they used based on those types of needs and the different group contexts. They also found that debriefing strategies were the hardest for them to learn. So they took the most time and the most ongoing practice to master, but at the same time, staff found great value in them. And then finally, we found that cohorts of youth whose facilitators were trained on at least one of the modules were statistically significantly more likely to say that they thought the program helped them compared to cohorts of youth taught by those same facilitators, but before they had received the facilitation skills training. If you're interested, there's a lot more on the facilitators' experiences and the lessons that they learned in the formative evaluation report. So I definitely recommend that if you're curious about what else they shared. But for now, I want you to hear from one of the trainees directly. So Marianne and her colleagues from Youth and Family Services in South Dakota participated in the trainings. As I mentioned, they tested out the strategies and they provided feedback on all of the materials along the way. This collaboration was absolutely critical in making the curriculum useful for the field, and I cannot say that enough. So I'd now like to invite Marianne to share a bit about her experiences.
Hello, everyone. Our team of facilitators is so thankful to have this opportunity to be part of the Streams curriculum just development. The process of training, testing, and implementing these skills made each one of us a better facilitator. We've always been really good at what we delivered in the classrooms. We know exactly what the content is. This project helped us to be more intentional about the how we deliver it in our classes. For example, the managing energy part. There's a huge difference in classroom energy in the 8 o'clock class versus the 12 o'clock class right after lunch versus the 2 o'clock class after a long day. This curriculum gave us so many tools and strategies in managing those different levels of energy. Also, when we started this project, I was a classroom facilitator. After training and coaching through those sessions, I transitioned to a supervisory role. And this curriculum has provided an objective framework for when I'm doing those classroom observations. And there's no surprises in the observations for the facilitators or the observer. It's very objective. We use this curriculum as a training tool when we onboard all of our facilitators. We pair a new facilitator with an experienced one for the first 6 months of employment. I look forward to any questions you might have.
Thank you, Marianne. So we now have a lot of time left over for your questions, and we're eager to take them. Before we jump to questions, we want to make sure that you have the link to the materials. They're located on OPRE's website, and we will chat them out to you now. Our contact information is also on the slide, and we're happy to take questions after today as well. But now I would love to open it up for any questions.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jean Nav at Mathematica. I was one of the researchers working on this. Just a reminder, you can raise your hand to ask a question, or you could put it in the chat or in the Q&A. So I see, what is the name of this curriculum? It's a mouthful of a name. Erin, do you want to?
Yeah, sorry, I got stuck on mute.
Well,
It is called the Strengthening Facilitation Skills, a training curriculum for programs working with youth.
so, and then, but we just put in the chat a link to those materials that were posted on the OPRE website recently. That is a link to the report, the formative evaluation report that Erin has been talking about, but also all the curriculum materials and supplemental materials like the tip sheets. So one person asked, is the training virtual or in person? So this is a training that you are going to potentially give to trainees. I think we would agree that it would be best done in person, but I don't know, Scott, is it something that's also conducive to virtual delivery?
I think you could do a limited training in a virtual setting, but certainly I think any facilitation skills training, a big part of it is actually working through the activities, practicing them in person, doing teach backs in front of the group of facilitators. So I think you'll have a much better outcome for your facilitators, and it's a much better use of the product to do in person. Yes.
Right. Someone asked if it's free to use. It is free to use, and we encourage all of you to use it. It's all the materials are free. And someone else asked, can you be self-taught through the materials provided? And yes, that is the intention. So there is a very large facilitation guide that includes, you know, talking points, slides for you. It is intended for you to sort of have a lead facilitator teach themselves this curriculum and then implement that with other facilitators in your organization. One person asked if there's any TA provided to those planning to train their facilitators with this curriculum. At this time, there is not. But if you are interested in technical assistance and you are a federal grantee, we encourage you to reach out to your project officer or your program TA provider, and some of them are on these webinars. They were invited and made aware of these materials. So someone asked about the demographics of the youth. I'm going to throw that to two people. So Scott, can you talk a little bit about who the strategies, who's the sort of target audience of the strategies in terms of the age groups and the populations, and how we incorporated a little bit of you know, tips for people that maybe sort of to tailor certain strategies for different age groups or different settings like large and small groups. And then Marianne, maybe you can talk a little bit about the groups that you tested the strategies on, the population.
Yeah, absolutely. The groups that we really worked with, the two grantees that we worked with were delivering services to youth in high school and predominantly middle school settings. I would say the majority of the work was done in high school settings, but certainly we worked to help them adapt them to a middle school setting. What folks will find is there are very few of the activities or skills that wouldn't apply to either. And certainly these are facilitator-based skills, so it's not even limited to just those serving youth. It was tested in that context, but it applies to the broader field of facilitation in general.
So adults, even those working with adults, might find very useful strategies. Yeah. Marianne, why don't you talk a little bit about some of the different populations and even the classroom context and group sizes and things like that, and what you learned?
Sure. So we use this, we tested it out with a small rural high school and then a little larger high school in our community of Rapid City. High school students, all many different ethnicities. Again, as it was said, you can use, this is about your facilitation skills and are so adaptable to anything. And in fact, we have an adult program also, and I shared these materials with the adult facilitators, and they're actually using them also now.
And so it sounds like, Marianne, you did use these with use of multiple races. That was a specific question about whether we found that you would find these applicable. Yeah.
Absolutely. These are generic skills that can be used in any classroom, no matter what the content, I think.
Right. Are there any hands raised, Derek?
Hey, Shane, we do not have anyone with their hands raised at this time.
Okay. I see one question that I missed. So one question is, what motivated you all to develop these materials? So Scott, that started with you quite a bit ago. Do you want to talk a little bit about the origins?
Absolutely. Because in facilitating, those skills are developed over years and years of practice. And one of the things that I found, especially through our TA work with different grant recipients, is that oftentimes folks are hired as a facilitator, they're trained in the curriculum, and then they're sent out to deliver services. The missing component there were basic facilitation skills with how to take that curriculum content and make it engaging and impactful for the population that they're serving. So that was really the motivation, was to fill the gap between a basic curriculum training and delivering the services to the end user, whoever that would be.
And Erin talked a little bit about this, but we did some interviews with a number of programs about the key challenges that they face, and came up with a menu of topics that the two grantees that were working with us to pilot could choose from. And both grantees, separate from each other in sort of all-day meetings, both picked the same 3 topics as sort of key challenges in their classrooms. So we really felt like these were topics that would resonate with lots of folks. One person asked, how long does the training usually take to complete? Scott, I know you sort of touched on this, but do you want to talk a little bit more about that and how
absolutely.
it might vary? Mm-hmm.
I think in general, each of the modules would be a 4-hour training. I think that's probably about bare minimum, really. But that can be extended based on how many folks that you have in your group, how much discussion there is, and then how much you dive into the optional activities, because we knew that different organizations would have different level of expertise. And so we provided a number of optional activities where you can take deeper dives into certain pieces. So if you included all of those and the teach backs, I think you're probably, if you've got a 4-hour base, which would be 12 hours, I would say you could probably easy count on an additional 4 to 6 hours, including the teach backs, if you did that with your facilitators. So that's why, while we recommend going through the entire training, we also at the same time recommend maybe doing a module at a time, letting people play with it, digest it, ask informed questions, maybe come back and do a teach back, and then move on to the next module. It's a process rather than just fire hosing people and feeding it all at once.
Someone asked, I'm going to throw this out to the group, anyone who wants to respond. What does this curriculum offer that other facilitation tip programs do not?
That's a great question. I think probably what it offers that's different from some that I've seen is it has that combination of really solid theory with why we're doing what we're doing, but then practical application, tips and techniques to take the theory and put it into action, and then those supplementary materials. So in particular, the tip sheets and the back pocket cards. Those are so helpful in actually putting this into practice. And Marianne, I'll let you speak to that. What did you guys find?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And there's probably not a day that I don't use or my facilitators don't use those back pocket tips. You know, especially after maybe something didn't go so well at first period, they'll pull out that back pocket tip and think of or try to come up with a different strategy or different activity. So these are really tangible skills to use. And that's what we appreciated most about it.
I think also the
And
process of refining it alongside the programs made them become like much better products because we used them, we conducted the trainings, facilitators tested them out, then we collected all this data on what was working well and what wasn't, what needed to be tweaked, and refined them. And, you know, did that 3 separate times with each of the different trainings and then after the whole process. And so I think that too could lead it to become, I think that definitely led it to become a much better package overall.
Sure.
And lots of examples. I know that was one of the things, right? More examples, keep adding more examples for all the different scenarios that you might encounter in the classroom. So someone asked how we came up with the observation materials. And I know that was the thing that got revised the most throughout the process. So I'm not sure who wants to speak to that, Sabui or who? Oh, Sabui turned her video on. She's ready to jump in.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about it, but obviously I think, Scott, you can also share your experience with it. So I think when we were developing the observation tool, I think this is a really good question because this is one of the things that did get refined a fair bit through this process. And really, I think we came up with something that hopefully was very useful. There were a couple purposes to the observations. We wanted to obviously see how facilitators were applying the training strategies in the classroom and provide feedback. But then we also wanted input from folks like Marianne and supervisors and facilitators so that we could refine the observation tool that we had developed. It began with kind of a system of benchmarks for rating the appropriate use of these training strategies that we partnered with Scott and Marianne and others to kind of come up with an initial set of benchmarks. And then we adjusted those over time based on their feedback. And so, you know, we asked facilitators and supervisors what they liked and what they didn't like about using that observation tool, whether it was useful after every observation, you know, what they thought of the ratings, how well they worked in terms of providing feedback. And then we adjusted that tool accordingly. You know, it started out as fairly long and we refined it so that it's much more manageable now. We refined the scale, we refined the items to be clearer and more usable and added examples. We added a key takeaways sheet that enables supervisors to document the key feedback that they're delivering to facilitators. So it went through several iterations and came up with this version. So I don't know, Scott, if you wanted to add anything about, or Marianne, because I know you all are using it as well.
I would just add that one of the things that we really strived for was to create a tool that really was objective, so that if you have more than one person going in and doing observations in your organization, that it wasn't as dependent upon observations. I think are always better when done by a well-seasoned facilitator or supervisor, but we tried to create an objective tool here to kind of take out some of that subjective opinion that often comes in to observations. We also, I think one of the biggest and most helpful iterations was when it was categorized based on, rather than based on topic, it was based on what you might see and want to observe as it relates to the 3 topics covered.
Yeah.
at the beginning of the session, during the meat of the session, and then at the end of the session, because that way, in some of the first iterations, the observation tool was a little clunky because you're flipping pages back and forth. And so the final iteration with it organized made it much more user friendly. And what do you think, Marianne?
You stole my word. Very user friendly, and you can have the best tool in the world, and if it's not user friendly, it's not useful. And this one is so easy to use, and it's easy for the facilitators to use also, because they know exactly what's on it, no surprises, very objective, which I like.
All right, there are no more questions in the chat. Derek, do we have any hands raised?
Shane, we do not.
All right, we can wait one more minute and see if there's any additional burning questions. Otherwise, we encourage you all to just take a look, open it up, take a look at the materials. You know, certainly everyone can use the tip sheets. Some of the back pocket materials might be useful, and supplementary materials that talk about some of the activities you can use to engage, to manage energy and reset energy in the classroom. But hopefully some of you will use this to train your facilitators, and we encourage you to share how it goes with us. All right, thank you to all the presenters today. And please reach out if you have any questions to Erin or Scott, whose email addresses are on the slide. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Oh, we got one more question.
Oh.
Do you discourage adapting the materials? I don't think we discourage adapting the materials. No.
No, we include suggestions within the trainer's guide for how you might tailor the talking points to your context, you know, depending on your curriculum or the specific needs of your facilitators and supervisors. Scott, what do you have any other thoughts or suggestions on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think these are basic facilitation skills that really every facilitator needs to know and master. And the process of mastery just takes time. So you will definitely, I think, have to adapt them to your audience, to your setting, because, you know, as with anything, some activities don't lend themselves to a classroom style setting. So you absolutely will be able to adapt them to your situation. And I would actually encourage you. That's when they're most useful, when they fit and are useful to you.
I'd just like to add too that this would be a really great professional development tool for you to use in your development of facilitators and teachers.
Great. And so one of the things that we just got to thank you for answering that question, and they noted that this is a great refresher. And, you know, I know, Marianne, you feel like this was useful for those who are experienced trainers, you know, experienced facilitators as well as sort of new facilitators. So
Absolutely.
I think it can be useful for all. All right, thanks everyone.